Hello and welcome to Cupcake Addiction's first ever light up cake tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this awesome Skylanders Swap Force Portal of Power in cake form. If you're not familiar with what Skylanders is, it is the #1 children's toy and video game franchise in the world. It's one of the most requested party ideas and one of the most requested gift options. And this Portal of Power that I'm going to be showing you how to make today is from the current Skylanders Swap Force edition. Basically, your kids grab their little toys, they stick them onto this Portal of Power, and that toy becomes alive in the video game that they're playing. It's truly one of the coolest forms of interactive play. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this cake, and you can also team it up with my cupcake tutorial and this free printable Skylanders party pack for the ultimate Skylanders Swap Force party. The things that you'll need for today's tutorial, I've got a 10-inch cake board, I've also got a 7-inch cake board, and I've got two 7-inch cakes. They're actually stacked on top of each other, so you can take one tall one and cut it in half. They're about 1 inch each high. Of course, I've got my Skylanders Swap Force figurines to top my cake. I've got an impression mat. This is a Cobblestone impression mat, and they're available in a variety of brands. It's a really common pattern. For our light up effect today, I've got a little 4-inch cake board, and I'm also using a light up drink coaster. This is going to give us our illuminating effect, and if you're looking for these, they are really widely available on eBay, and you shouldn't pay more than $5 or $6 for one. You'll need a small coin, some Blu-tac, a sharp knife, a serrated edge knife, a pizza cutter, a couple of paintbrushes, and a fondant rolling pin. I'm using some fondant in dark grey and also in white. I've got an offset spatula, a ruler, and a little bit of wax or baking paper, as well as just a napkin. I've got some ganache, and I will link to our chocolate ganache recipe in the description box below. I'm using LCM Bars, which are a Rice Krispie treat, but of course you can use your own homemade Rice Krispie treats for this. I've got a little bit of silver shimmer powder or silver luster dust, and a couple of circle cutters. I'll leave dimensions to those in the description box below. I've also got a little bit of water, some cornflour in a shaker, a pair of scissors, and a Ziploc bag. Off to the side, I've got my actual Skylanders Swap Force portal, so you can see what we're going to be making today. But bear in mind that if you're making this for a die-hard Skylanders fan, this is the Swap Force portal, which is for the current installment of the game, and it's quite different to the original Skylanders portal that came out years ago. Let's get started. The first thing that you want to do is you want to make your portal lid, because this needs a lot of time to set and go really firm before we can put it on the cake. So you want to take your white fondant and roll it out really quite nice and thin. You can see the thickness that I've got there. And then you want to take your 7-inch cake board and your pizza cutter, and we're just using that 7-inch because it's the same size as the cake that we're using, so that we know that we've got a portal lid about the same size as our cake. Stick it on a little piece of wax paper and just make sure you're running your fingers around the edge to keep your circle shape. And then take the back of one of those paintbrushes, and you kind of want to do like 2 coils here, one on the outside, one on the inside. And then you want to take your napkin. You want to just scrunch it up. So kind of twist it and then scrunch it. And this was the easiest way that I found to get this effect. I'm just pushing it. So I'm using those paintbrush impressions as a bit of a guide, and then I'm going around them. This creates kind of like, I guess it's a bit of a lightning effect from the Portal of Power. And if I pull this alongside the actual Portal of Power, you'll see that we've done a pretty good job of matching that pattern without any real fancy tools or equipment. You want to give this 12 to 24 hours to completely set, and you can also add a little bit of Tylose or CMC, which is going to help it set just a little bit faster. Now, for your drink coaster, generally these require the pressure of something sitting on top of them, such as a drink, to actually activate the light. There's a little pressure switch on the bottom. We're not going to have any pressure on top, so we need to hack this little pressure switch. Take a tiny little ball of Blu-tac and just press it on really, really hard, and then take your coin and really jam it on. Turn it around, sit it up the right way, and make sure that it's still flashing even when you've got no pressure on it. For the turrets of our Portal of Power, I'm actually going to carve up these Rice Krispie squares. So if you don't have access to LCMs, this particular brand, where you are, I will leave dimensions of these little rectangles in the description box below, but they're fabulously handy for getting all the exact same size pieces. Once you've carved out your little ridge, you want to take some of your dark grey fondant and roll it out really nice and thin. Clear off your workspace so you're not getting cornflour and everything, and turn it over so it's cornflour side up facing you. And you want to take your knife and just cut a nice flat edge. Wrap that edge about halfway over to the middle of your LCM bar and put a little bit of water on there with your paintbrush, and then fold the other side over and cut across where you can kind of see the little ridge popping up between the top layer. Give it a little smooth down, but don't be too fussy here. And then just lift up the little top and bottom flaps and just pop a little bit of water down. Use your fingers to push it down so it conforms to the shape of your Rice Krispie treat, and then just neaten off the edges. Once again, don't be too fussy. You're really just trying to clean up any seam lines and blend them in. You want to take your serrated edge knife now and you want to make sure that little ridge that you've cut in is really well defined, because this is what your portal is going to sit on. Now, to dress up your portal turrets, take your paintbrush and just sort of run the back along so you've got this little mini, kind of like an indentation in the top. And then you want to take, I'm going to use just the back of my knife here and just push it into the fondant. So I'm making a little circle. I'm going to use my finger kind of to define it as a circle a little bit more. Then I'm going to use the back of the paintbrush once again, and I'm just going to roll it about halfway up the LCM. So it's a couple of paintbrush widths wide. Using the back of my knife, I'm just going to put a little defining line down the center, and you should have something that looks a little like this. Finally, it's time for cake. So take a bit of ganache, smear it on your board so your cake's got something to stick to. It's important to make sure your cake never goes above this line on the turret where your portal lid is going to sit, and if possible, you want to keep it about 1 centimeter below that line. Give it a ganache. So I'm just getting my offset spatula, I'm smearing on just a nice light coating of that ganache in between the layers, and then I'm going to stick the second layer on top. You can never have too much chocolate on a cake, right? Once again, checking that cake height, and then you just want to kind of join the two pieces of your cake together by ganaching all the way up the sides, and then I'm going to put ganache around just the outside of the top of my cake. So I'm going to kind of leave the center circle with no ganache on it. I recommend ganache over frosting here because it's going to help give your cake a lot more structure and a lot more support. You'll see here the circle cutter that I'm using is larger than both the cake board and also that flashing coaster. So I'm going to stick that on top and just give it a little twist. But if you're using a really soft cake like I am, you're better off to take like a serrated edge knife and just use the circle as a bit of a guide to help not destroy your cake, because we're only really leaving a thin amount of cake around those outside edges. I'm going to pull that circle cutter off and use my knife just to pry up that center section of cake. And we can eat that or use it for cake pops. Once you've pulled out a few of your excess crumbs, just do a really light, loose coat of ganache. That's going to seal the cake and stop it from drying out. And then you want to pop it off into either the fridge or the freezer for about 15 minutes so your ganache can set. Now that your cake's pretty well set, it's going to be a lot easier to work with. So take one of your little portal turrets and your knife, and you just want to make a little indentation on either side of the turret so you know what size to cut. Slice down either side of that indentation and then kind of cut away that section of cake. So what you've got is an indent. This is why we set the ganache, but you don't want to freeze the cake. You don't want to leave it in that fridge or freezer for more than about 15 minutes. We really just want to firm it up. Take some of your fresh ganache and just use a knife to apply it to the inside of where you've just cut, and then push that turret into place. The wet ganache is going to help it stick and make sure it's not going to fall off the side of your cake. Loosely position all of your turrets before you go cutting any more of them, and I used 5 on this 7-inch cake. Traditionally on the Portal of Power there are 8 of these little turrets or cornerstones, but 8 would have looked ridiculous on a cake this size, so I went with 5. But if you're upsizing this cake, you can certainly add in more. Just use your eyes to gauge the rough proportions so that you're not putting too many turrets in and you've got enough room for the tunnels in between them. Now's a good time to take your portal lid and just make sure that it's sitting nice and flush on those ridges that you've created, because now's the perfect opportunity to kind of pull a couple of those little turrets or cornerstones out or push them in as you need to. Take your little circle cutter now and you just want to push it in about halfway down, and I'm really just gouging out like a little indent for those little tunnels. With the back of a spoon, I'm going to give those little indents a bit of a coat of ganache, once again just to seal them and so that our fondant's got something to stick to. Spoon a bit more of that ganache into your Ziploc bag and then use your scissors to cut off like a nice wide chunky tip. We're just fashioning this into a little bit of a makeshift piping bag. Take your piping bag now and you want to build up just the very, very outer edge of your cake with that ganache. This you want to be about the same level as the ridge that you've cut into those turrets, and this is going to help lift your portal up on the outsides while still leaving it exposed on the inside so that your light effect will spread. I'm using the back of my palette knife just to smooth it off on the sides so that it's about the same smoothness as the edges. Take your little 4-inch cake board now and push it right into the cake, and then just position your little light to make sure that it's all sitting flush inside the lines of your cake. It's best to pop your cake back in the fridge or freezer for another 5 or 10 minutes just to help it set. And then you want to roll out some of your grey fondant, and you also want to roll out some of your white. So your white should really be quite thin. Take your smaller circle cutter here and you're going to just cut a circle, and then you want to stick it inside those little portal holes. Just loosely rest it in, put all 5 of those around, and then just go around and use your finger just to neaten it up. And then I'm going to use my thumb just to drag the base of the little tunnel down so that it's not such a round circle, so it kind of goes flat against the board. Using your grey fondant now, you want to put the good side against the impression mat and roll once in one direction and once back towards you. Don't double roll or you'll end up with a double pattern. This is the kind of an imprint that you get. I use my ruler here just to roughly measure the sizes that I want. So sort of the height and the width very, very roughly, and my pizza cutter to cut out the basic shapes. So once I've cut out my basic shape and I'm happy that it's about the right width, I'm going to take my circle cutter once again and cut a little circle, and then use my knife to just give it that tunnel shape so it's not so circular. And then using my fingers, I'm just pushing it up against the ganache. You really want to make sure that your edges or your sides are nice and secure. You can use a knife, or you can see here the back of a knife, just to make sure they're nice and tight up against those turrets so you can't see any ganache poking through. Don't worry if you can see a bit of ganache poking through where those little portal holes are. We're going to be covering that up. Take your grey fondant and roll out a nice thin sausage, and we're just going to use this just to neaten up the bottom edges of our cake. So really it's only going just inside your little portal holes, and I'm just going to trim off the edges. It's just going to neaten it up a little bit, and now you get to repeat that step 4 more times so you've completely covered the outer 5 sections of your portal cake. Once your cake's covered, we're going to make the little brick archways that go over your little portal tunnels. So I'm just cutting this piece into basically 4, and I'm taking one little tunnel shape out of each of the 4. Trim off the edges so it's not so circular again, and then I'm going to use my pizza cutter and I'm just going to basically trace around. It's about a ½ an inch wide. Then I'm using the back of my knife just to indent the edges all the way around so that it looks a little bit messier. And then I'm going to use, once again, the back of my knife to make some little bricky imprints. Don't worry if you end up with cornflour everywhere here, because we're going to be painting these anyway. So if you've got any cornflour marks or cornflour stains, they are going to get covered off. A little bit of water on the back acts like your glue. Use that to glue your little tunnel outside up against the porthole, pushing it all the way around the edges, and you can see there it's covered any space where you may have had ganache poking out. It's a really, really great time to cover up any of your mistakes. You can see there all of my completed portal tunnels all the way around. Take your silver luster dust, and I dilute mine with a little bit of alcohol here, but you can also use clear lemon extract and it will do the same job. I mix it together to form a nice thick paint, and this is going to give me a nice shiny silver, just like the actual Skylanders Swap Force Portal of Power. I'm really roughly painting it on. The thing that I love about this cake is the portal itself is really rough. So the rougher the cake looks, the more authentic it looks. In these little circles that we hollowed out with the back of the knife, I'm actually painting some of the elements from the Skylanders Swap Force game. So I will leave a link below in the description box so you can see a picture of these elements if you want to add in that detail. Once I've painted up my turrets, I'm going to go around and I'm also going to paint up the outside of those little tunnels and a few of the little cobblestone bricks above, but not all of them, just like a little selection. It pays to have either the actual portal or a picture of the portal beside you for this part. It just helps you to get a little bit more authenticity in your paint job, which really brings your cake to life. If you've been observing my cool little Skylanders Swap Force guys throughout this video, you'll notice that I've been swapping the tops and the bottoms and moving them around and interchanging them. That's the fabulous thing about this game. There's 16 main characters, but you can swap the tops and the bottom, which actually gives you like over 250 unique combinations. Just before you're wanting to display or deliver your cake, you want to take a scoop of that ganache and stick it on the back of the light, using that to stick it to the board. This is going to stop the light from sliding around and touching any part of that edible cake. I used high quality batteries in my light and I found it lasted for me about 18 hours. Make sure this light and that board are removed before serving this cake. Take your portal lid now, which should be completely set, and you can still position those turrets a little bit just to make sure you've got a really nice flush fit. And your Skylanders Swap Force Light Up Portal of Power cake is complete. These lights aren't the best for showing you how cool it looks, so we'll dim them down a little bit. Now you can pick whichever Swap Force character you like, and I'm going with one of these super cool limited edition ones that are only available for Easter. So if you want this little guy, his name is Springtime Trigger Happy, and he is limited edition, so I recommend you go and grab him soon. If you want to find out where to purchase any of these Skylanders Swap Force pieces, from the game and the portal right the way through to these limited edition characters and top up toys for your set, head to the Skylanders website. I'll leave a link to the website in the description box below, and I'm also going to leave you a link for those free party printables so you can completely theme your Skylanders Swap Force party. Also make sure you check out our Skylanders Elements cupcakes. I hope you guys have enjoyed this really cool tutorial, a whole lot of new skills and a great wow factor cake. As always, thanks very much for tuning in to My Cupcake Addiction.